Ever get this, like, really uneasy feeling when a story just doesn't add up, like something's off?
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of where we're at today with Sheldon Johnson. And, we've got a Wikipedia article, a news report, legal stuff, and even a YouTube deep dive, true crime analysis.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So what makes this one so different?
Well, let's rewind a bit. February 2024. Picture yourself listening to Joe Rogan.
Okay.
His guest, Sheldon Johnson.
Okay.
And he's with Josh Dubin, this lawyer known for taking on, like, wrongful convictions.
Yeah.
Right out the gate, Dubin's calling Johnson a success, someone who beat the odds.
Okay. So he's already being framed a certain way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Johnson, well, he plays into it.
Uh-oh.
Talking about his rough childhood in Harlem, deaf parents, even translating, get this, drug deals for his dad as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff.
And, those experiences, he says they shaped him,
Right, like foundational to his whole argument later.
Totally. Then he gets into juvenile detention, starting at 10. Over-medicated, abused by staff, even time in psych wards. It's a lot, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Hard to imagine that not messing you up.
And that's where he segues into, like, this whole prison reform thing, right? Rehabilitation over punishment.
Okay, yeah.
He admits to joining the Bloods in prison, doesn't shy away from it.
Mm-hmm.
But then he emphasizes leaving the gang, getting his college degree while inside. Like, on the surface, it's inspiring.
Redemption arc.
But, and this is key. This is weeks before he's accused of something truly awful.
Oh, no. Okay, so this is where it gets dark.
Yeah. Colin Small, the victim, found murdered March 5th, 2024. And here's the kicker. They were childhood friends.
No way.
Even did time together to Sing Sing.
Oh, that's even more tragic, like a betrayal on top of everything else.
Exactly. So March 5th, wellness check at Small's apartment in the Bronx. They find his body dismembered.
Oh, God.
Torso and feet in a freezer, a blue bin. It's gruesome.
Yeah, that's rough.
And the news reports just get worse. The super, he remembers hearing gunshots, a man pleading for his life the night before.
Oh, my God.
But here's where it gets really strange. Surveillance footage, right? They catch Johnson going in and out of Small's place multiple times.
Okay.
But
Mm-hmm.
he's wearing disguises, like a blonde wig even.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. And get this, he's carrying cleaning supplies and that same blue bin.
So it's premeditated.
Seems like it, right?
Wow, that's chilling.
And it gets worse.
Yeah.
They found Small's head, other body parts, at Johnson's place in Harlem.
God, this is a lot to unpack.
It is. And that's the point, right? How do we reconcile these two versions of Sheldon Johnson? The advocate, the changed man, and this.
It's wild, right? Like, one minute he's giving this whole spiel about how education keeps people from going back to prison, advocating for second chances.
He's living proof, supposedly. I mean, he says, I just came from the bowels of hell, spending 25 years in prison, and now I'm in the sky above the clouds to talk about change.
Powerful stuff. But was he for real? Or was it all an act? After all those years building up this whole narrative.
That's the question, isn't it? And, that YouTube video you picked, the true crime one, it gets even deeper into his past, especially his time in juvie.
Oh, right. Things take a turn there, don't they?
Big time. He talks about some really messed up stuff happening in those places. Abuse, both physical and worse.
God, that's awful. If it's true, it really makes those early experiences even more significant.
Yeah, no doubt. And it kind of ties back to what they were talking about on Rogan, right? About the systemic issues. Like, remember how Johnson's parents were both deaf, struggling to find work?
Right. A classic example of how tough it is for certain communities.
Exactly. And then you've got the crack epidemic, right? Like, Johnson and Dubin talked about how much damage that caused. The violence, addiction, all of it, especially in already struggling communities.
It's like you can't tell this story without talking about all that baggage,
Absolutely. So we've got all these factors at play. A rough childhood, these allegations of abuse, and a system that often seems more about punishment than actually helping people. And then this horrific act of violence.
Like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing.
And that brings up a really difficult question, one that I think you'll keep coming back to. Do any of these things, the systemic failures, the trauma, do they justify murder, taking a life, especially someone who was trying to help him?
Man, that's a tough one. It makes you really think about justice, accountability, even redemption.
It really does. Because if we believe him, if he was actually trying to change, then this whole thing becomes even more confusing.
Right. Like, how can someone go through all that, seemingly come out the other side, and still do something so awful?
It makes you wonder about human nature,
Yeah.
like maybe that capacity for darkness, it never really goes away.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, so disturbing. We're not just talking about a crime here. We're talking about the potential for both good and bad that exists in us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that there might not be an easy answer. It's just, I don't know, like your brain almost short circuits, This guy, after everything, dedicating himself to bettering himself, fighting for others, and then this brutality.
Yeah, and the reaction makes it even weirder. It wasn't just people who knew him casually. It was the people closest to him, the ones who supposedly saw this transformation firsthand. They were floored.
Like his dad. When reporters talked to him, he was adamant. He is a good man, he said. He was doing work in a law office. There were no problems. Like, that's got to mean something, right?
Totally. It just highlights how completely contradictory this all is. The people who knew Johnson best, they believed in him. The guy they knew, the one they thought he'd become, it's like that's all they could see.
It's easy to forget, with all the details and stuff, that this isn't just some theoretical case study. There are real people hurting because of this.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, can you ever really know someone? Like, can you ever be truly sure someone's changed, that they won't hurt you, or worse?
It's a question that just keeps coming up, especially when you go back to that Wikipedia article. His past, the Bloods, 25 years for attempted murder. It's heavy stuff.
And those years in prison, they weren't a walk in the park, By his own admission, solitary crap food, battling addiction. It's grim.
But even then, even in that environment, he says he found a way out. This period of introspection, right? Like, he realized he had to change. Started with education, got his GED, then a bachelor's degree.
He paints this picture of a guy actively trying to make amends, finding something to hold on to in the most unlikely place, mentoring other inmates, working in the prison library, even helping some of them get out.
On the surface, it's a story of hope. Like, even in a system that often seems designed to break people, change is possible. But then you've got this horrific crime staring you in the face.
And that's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does this show that rehabilitation has its limits? Or is it more about free will, about the choices we make, good or bad?
I think as you keep thinking about this case, about everything we've discussed, it's worth considering this. Maybe it's not one or the other. Maybe it's both.
Right. What if Johnson's story isn't proof that rehabilitation works or doesn't work, but rather a reminder that people are complicated, that the potential for good and evil, it can exist in the same person?
Yeah, that's kind of scary when you think about it. And it leads to a final question, and maybe the most unsettling one. If even the best attempts at rehabilitation can't always prevent something like this, what does that say about us? About our justice system?
It's a huge question, one that goes way beyond this one case. It makes you think about crime, punishment, forgiveness, everything.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and I hope it's left you with more to think about than easy answers.
Because sometimes the most valuable lessons come from sitting with the uncomfortable stuff, from accepting that things are rarely black and white.
Thanks for sticking with us on this one. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep digging for the truth.